Guys, welcome to CRUD, and I am back. I hope you guys have been doing good. I've been doing quite good by my side. It's been a while since I did a live, but I'm busy with some Spring Boot end-to-end tutorial from beginner all the way to a comfortable level as a developer where you can take on a new project. So I'm setting up a full end-to-end series for Spring Boot. So please do watch out for that one. And it's coming out in a couple of weeks. It does get quite hectic when you are doing all of these editing, recording on your own. So please bear with me. That will be out in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, today we'll be talking all things code, and we're doing a AWS DynamoDB integration to Spring Boot microservices or microservice rather. So let's jump right into it. So what we are going to need is our Spring initializer. As always, that's where we start. You have the project metadata here. The project metadata is on the project. We have Maven, language is Java. Spring Boot version is 3.5.3. We always choose the latest stable version, as well as the dependencies. Make sure you always choose the latest stable version so that you have the long time support on all of those dependencies. And then if you look at the group, it's com.zip code as per always or as per usual. Artifact is Dynamo Microservice, and the description is demo project for Spring Boot. Packaging is jar, and the Java version is 17. Then you can add a couple of dependencies over here. You have Spring Boot DevTools, you have Lombok, you have Spring Web to create our REST APIs or controllers in the application, and then you have Actuator just to check if the service is up or the metadata about the service status and things like that. So once this is generated, one thing you will see the dependency side, we are missing Dynamo itself. So I'll show you that in the IDE on IntelliJ side on the POM file, which dependency we're going to add with these so that we're able to connect to our AWS DynamoDB. So if you want the project, we have that repository available. So you just github.com zipcode studio Dynamo microservice, and you can pull the project and start running it. But obviously you would need to change a couple of configs like the access key, secret key. You need to point to your own AWS instance and your own Dynamo database tables. So in here I exposed the keys in this particular commit. So you will see that Git was actually blocking me, so I had to explicitly allow those secrets, so secret allowed, and that's just a feature on vulnerability checks on your code. So I appreciate GitHub actually for that, because they do check if any keys are exposed and your accounts and things like that can be compromised. So here I explicitly allow that because I'm using this for testing, and I will delete the aim user once I am done. So if we go to AWS right now, just to show you how to set everything up, you can see I used DynamoDB and I used AIM user over here. So the AIM user is the one that I use the access key and the secret key to interact with my DynamoDB right here. So if you don't have the DynamoDB, you can just go to this search bar at the top and just type in Dynamo. It will come up managed NoSQL database. So Dynamo is a fully managed database for you, so you don't have to worry about the infrastructure and the setup or the scaling of this particular database. AWS does that for you, so you don't have to stress as much. So that's one of the benefits of using DynamoDB, is that you don't have to worry yourself about managing the actual infrastructure. So let's get into the DynamoDB setup. You can see it will just take us to the dashboard. If you don't have anything, it will just show a widget over here on this side here to create a table. So as you can see, for now I don't have favorite tables, So I can say view all tables on my instance because I have one table created, and you can see in those tables I have employee details, which is the one that I'll be showing you right now. There is a partition key which I use as a primary key, which is employee number, and it is a string. So you see the type S there, which is a string. Then if you go into that particular table, you will see the metadata about that particular table, and if you scroll down, you see the ARN for that table, and you will see read-write capacity, and all the details that you want to basically know, anything and everything that there is to know about this particular table will be contained in here. You will see there's indexes also here. You can create an index for your table so that when you perform like read operations and things like that, it can be much quicker. Monitoring, you can set up alarms or alerts and things like that for your CloudWatch. And then you also have backups, which you can set up. And you also have exports and streams. So exports and streams, you can actually create listeners or Lambda functions that listen to any event that comes into the table, and basically that Lambda can then export the data to like any type of export that you want. We have export to S3. So basically it will then take this particular any entries into the database or changes, it will basically take those changes into like an S3 file, JSON, and things like that. So there's a whole lot of trigger functions that you can create for these particular listeners in the table itself to export the data as it comes in. Or so let's say in an instance you want to have a listener on the table to publish the messages into a queue, for example. You have those Lambda functions that you can create and do all of those listening to what's happening over here. So those are nice to have in AWS, and those capabilities can come in very handy actually with DynamoDB setup. So yeah, that's just the nice to haves, and let's get right into it. So let's go into let me see. I want to go to tables, and in my table over here, and then let's see in the table. Yeah, I think I've covered everything about the actual table. Let's just run into the AIM user. So let's go into the AIM user. Let's go to IAM. So in IAM, I want to show you the user that is actually allowed to perform any operations on that particular table. So in here, you will see user groups. There's one user group I've created. Users, there's only one user, and roles. There's 4 roles for this user, and I'll show you those. And policies, there's one policy for this one user that I have. So let's go to users, and you will see I created a Dynamo user. And if I go to that particular user, you will see that console access enabled with that MFA. So this is multi-factor authentication, and then there's access key, which is the access key that I have on the Spring Boot side. Then there's secret key that goes with this access key. So I only set up one, I didn't set up another one. So if you want to see the permissions and or the permission policies, you will see Amazon DynamoDB full access v2, full access, blah, 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 read-only access, compromise key, quarantine v3, Lambda Dynamo, and Lambda invocation DynamoDB. So you can add and remove as much as you want based on what the user can and cannot do in your account. So in my instance, as soon as I'm done with this demo, I'll just remove the entire the entire user because it's a test user for this particular tutorial, and I'll get rid of it. So I'll just delete it over here. So now that I've shown you that, let's then go back. So in this group, let's go into that group quickly. Or rather, let me actually do this. Go back to users over here. And then I can actually create a user, and in this user I can then, let's say, dummy Dynamo U, something like that, right? And then you can say provide user access to AWS console. This is optional. If you want to give access to the console, yes, you want to, and specify user identity center recommended. I want to create an IAM user, auto-generated password, and things like that. So I don't really need to or want to show a lot of things here. Add user group, right? So I can choose a user group or create a new user group, and then I'll define what I want in here. So you can see this Dynamo group, Amazon full access is what is the policy attached to this particular group, which I've just shown you now, but this is just a rundown of how you can set that up. So let's go back into Dynamo now that you understand how the user is set up. Now if you go back to Dynamo, you can just say leave, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to create a user. Now go back to Dynamo, go to tables, and let's close that. I just want to make sure that I've covered everything there is in Dynamo. So in here, let's just do create like a table, and in this table, let's say maybe customer. For example, the table name will be customer. Then partition key, let's say customer ID, and then can be a string. If you don't know what they can pass in here, you can just say a string, or if you know that it's going to be a string or a number, you just use that. And then sort key, let's say customer name, something like that. I don't know, whatever the case might be. And then you can use default settings, or you can just set up like custom settings over here, which then you'll have to then add or choose more of the setup. Default settings should suffice if you are doing this for the first time. And you can see table class, DynamoDB standard, capacity mode on demand. So this will just scale on demand. And then AWS on key, boom, boom, boom. And then if you want to add any tags, you don't need that, then you can create the table like that. Now you have a customer table as well. So you can then attach an AIM user on this particular table. Let's go to permissions over here, and then go to IAM Access Analyzer or create table policy and things like that. So you can set that up the same as this particular table over here. So far, so good. Let's see. And yeah, that's about it. Let's go back into our IntelliJ quickly. So in IntelliJ, first things first, I'm going to show you the application properties. We have Spring Application Dynamo Microservice. And you can see here I have plugged in all the details about the Dynamo database that we're connecting to. Cloud AWS Dynamo region is EU North 1, which is the region that I am in right now, EU North 1. You can see that region over here as well, EU North 1. And then, let me go back to IntelliJ. Enabled, that's true, credentials, access key, secret key of the AIM user that I just showed you now. And then so these are actually the credentials for this Dynamo user, IAM user. The console access is basically this one. So I'll basically delete this user. So even if you try this, you won't get access to this thing. So yeah. So let's go into the POM file. So let's go into the POM file. Right. The one dependency that I was missing on the initializer is this dependency over here. So you need to add IO AWS Spring Cloud, and you will see that we have the AWS Data Dynamo, and always latest stable dependency. So we're using 3.3.0. And then the one other thing is dependency management. We need to add this dependency management, which is Spring Cloud AWS 3.3.0 again, and that should be enough to start interacting with our DynamoDB. Right, then let's get into the thick of it. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a sort of like a repository or an entity, which is, let's first, we're going to create an interface, a functional interface, which is table name. Table name is going to be used to map our entity class into a Dynamo table, right? In our case, it's employee details, right? So we have this functional interface. Target is element type, runtime. So the retention policy is runtime. And then we have the table name, and it's just the name. And then the next thing that we need to create is the custom table name resolver. So this table name resolver, you will see, is a Spring Bean, which is annotated with add component. And we also have this custom name resolver as the class implements Dynamo table name resolver. You will see here it has that override resolve. We pass the class name, which is the table, the class name of the actual table that we want to map, and then that will resolve the table name as according to that annotation. Right. So once our entity is resolved over here using the table name or that particular class name, you will see if we go to entity package, let's go into the entity package. We have an employee entity, and you will see there's this add table name functional interface that we call over here, and the name is employee details. So that's why we need this table name here, so that our entity can resolve into a table in Dynamo site, right? So we add all these long box, add data, all args, no args, add DynamoDB bean. This is very important so that it knows that this is an actual existing bean that we need to create that is linked to Dynamo. Right, and then we have a couple of fields. We have employee number, name, and email, right? And then with these fields, what we want on the employee number, because the partition key is the employee number, as I've shown you on the table, we have DynamoDB partition key, and we have these DynamoDB attribute, right? So this DynamoDB attribute maps into the employee number so that when we write and read, we can basically get these details as per usual. But I'll show you what I'm using instead of this particular entity class. Then let's go into the DTO. In the DTO, it's basically the same thing. Employee is ID, name, email, and phone. So here we have another object which is phone DTO, and phone DTO is just a POJO with a list of telephone numbers. So that is basically just a POJO, and then let's go back to employee. Right. Now we are going into the employee service, the business logic behind everything. So if you go to the main class, you will see there's nothing here. There's no enable JPA repositories or things like that. Nothing of that sort. Everything is running as is. So there's now no funny business in the main class. So let's go into the actual business logic, and then we will do the controller last so that you can see how this looks like. So we have a service over here and our employee service. We plug in our secret key and the access key and the secret key. Then we create a new DynamoDB client. You can basically move this injection here into like a custom configuration bean, which is one thing that I wanted to add. But because I'm now recording this, I just added everything into this employee service, but you can basically move this into a configuration bin, and then it will basically create all of these on the fly. Right. So we will need the DB client, we will need the DB enhanced client as well. Then finally, we will need the DynamoDB table, which is employee with the employee class that of type employee entity, right? That's the entity class over there, and then this is employee DynamoDB, and you can see there is only one user here, and you will see this later on how I actually use or create interactions with the table. So in the default constructor of this class, you have the employee constructor, and then in here we have the AWS basic credentials. Again, you can move this into a custom configuration class, but this should suffice. In the AWS credentials, you have the access key here. Because my PC is slow, it was taking forever to read those keys, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna plug them in here quickly. So we're gonna have our basic configuration, which is AWS basic configuration create, access key, secret key. There's nothing fancy happening in there. So once we have the credentials, we then initialize our DynamoDB client. So we put the region, which is EU North in our case, and the credentials provider, which is a static credentials provider that create AWS credentials, and we build that. Once that is built, you will see we then initialize the enhanced client using the DynamoDB enhanced client builder. Then we build that client, and then once we have a client, we then say employee DynamoDB enhanced client table. This is the table that we're pointing to, table schema from bin employee .class. So that named resolver will then resolve all of these for us, and it should basically be exposed for any operation that we want. All right, so now let's continue. Then I just want to show you what I am using for the CRUD operations in the database. Let's first start with the create. So I'm going to close. Let's take this down a bit. I'm going to close this get for now. I'm going to close this one. I'm going to close this one. Right. So we're going to do this create employee. So create employee, it takes in the employee DTO. The employee DTO comes from the employee controller over here, which is our REST API. If I can just go there quickly, let me actually do the controller so that we understand how the flow goes. So this is our REST controller. You can see REST controller, request mapping, we have our employee. And then in here, we auto wire employee service, and that is basically the business logic. And then we have our post, which is create employee, or in this instance, I just named it add employee. You will see request body employee DTO with the employee name, email, and those phone list. Then we just call employee create employee, and then we return a OK. So obviously in your instance, you would want to do some checks and balances, try catch, make sure you return the correct response. So over here, you can just surround this particular block with a try catch, and then you should be good to then validate if there's any failures, you respond to the user, to the client correctly. But for us, this should suffice. You will see that on the create, we have the employee DTO. Then on the get, you will see we get employee by ID, and the ID is employee number in our instance, so string ID, and the employee DTO will call the get employee ID. Then we pass in the ID that we got from the request, and we return a OK with the response that we get from there. So now let's jump into the actual, these two operations, the create and the get, now that we understand where they are coming from. So we're gonna go to create. Now our API has been triggered, and we have our employee DTO like that. So over here, we're gonna create a map of an item, hash map item, and that has a key of string, and it has an attribute value. That attribute value will set the actual value that you want to pass to Dynamo, Right, so with that item map, we put the employee number in that fashion, and then we put the name in that fashion. So you'll see the attribute value builder. Then we will say here, this is, we want this to be, we are passing a string, so you will see then expect a string. Otherwise, you have other builders like attribute value of long, which will then complain because this expects a number, and you'd have also a map. So if you have another map that you want to pass in, you can pass that. If it's a boolean, you can pass in a boolean. If it's yeah, so for now you can just use those ones. You'll have a number, you'll have string, you have boolean, you have map to have nested fields. I'll show you on the phone how that looks like. So for now we're going to pass in a string because our ID is a string. So we then take that dto.getID and then we use that builder, and we pass all these three fields. Now that we're done with those, all of them are string, we then create a map for the phone, because remember on our DTO, phone DTO, this telephone list is actually coming as this particular employee phone object over there. So let's go back to this, and you will see here in this hash map we have our telephone 1 and telephone 2, which is what we set in our object. So this is also a string, phone number, string, phone number, and things like that. So we set all of these values, and then we add the phone object into our initial map like that. So if you have a flat, let's say you have a flat structure or a flat DTO, you don't need to add all of this. You can just remove that like so, and then you'll set all the fields in that particular fashion, and you pass in that value, right? So obviously I'm just showcasing this to you. Once you're done creating your object that then needs to be passed into Dynamo, what we do is create a put item because we are adding a new item. Also, if we go into the put item, let's go into that quickly, and let's go. So you'll see it has a lot of implementation here. Did I get the docs? Let me see. Nope. Okay. But in this put item request, we essentially building a request that needs to be added to our table, and our table name is employee details. Our item is the item, which is the object that we want to pass in, and then we then build that item item request. Then we call our DynamoDB client. We then put that particular item with this request that we just built over here. And we're done with creating a entry into the database with just this particular request item and passing it into Dynamo client. It will then create the item for us. So let's see over here if I got that. Let's go into that quickly. And again, okay, I think I didn't get the sources so that you can basically see the docs for all of this, but that should be fine. In this instance, we just use the put item, and we also have let me just do this. We also have the get item, and we also have create backup, batch execution statement, batch get item, batch write item. So there's a whole lot of operations from the DynamoDB client that we can do. Create tables, delete backup, delete item, delete table, and then let's just go all the way. That one is actually far. Let's go all the way. I'm highlighting operations that you most likely use. Query, you can then create like a query request object and then pass that to a query, execute that, and you saw if you did let's just go back. There's an execute somewhere. So there's an execute statement, and then you can execute that. So let's go. I want to get to this one particular, the last operation actually, which is update item, right? So you also have an update item, and you can pass in like an update item request. So those operations are available, and now we are done with the create. Let's then see how this looks like in the in Postman quickly before I do the employee get. So let's go into our Postman. So this is Postman. Then we're gonna create employee. Let's see what is going on now. All right, cool. So this is fine. So I'm gonna create an employee. I'm gonna say this is 50007, something like that. Then we're gonna say subscriber 10 or something like that. Then subscribe 10. By the way, this is my ask for you to please subscribe if you like this video, if it's helpful to you and you're enjoying it so far. Please do like and subscribe, and do share for others to also join the channel. We have the Spring tutorial, end-to-end tutorial series that is coming up in the next few weeks. So please do check that out. So let's continue. Now we have our employee, employee created. Let's just maybe create like a different number, blah blah blah. Then let's create like a different number over here as well. I'm gonna type whatever, doesn't matter. There's no validation, so that's fine. Then we create this employee, and let's see what it does. And we're expecting a 200 OK. Why is it taking forever now? Right, 200 OK. So now let's get this employee by the employee ID. We're gonna go to employee get, and we're gonna pass in. You'll see that the query params ID. I'm just gonna put this ID here. Ugh, snap. What did this thing do? Okay, I don't care about everything else. I just want the number only, right? What? ID. Right. So ID 5007. Right. So let's send this, and we should be getting that response back. Boom. So now we have our response back, and with that number that we just sent through. So let's see what the get request does. So if you go to get request, obviously I've highlighted this get mapping over here. It will then pass in the ID, and then we will get employee by ID. So in here, in the get employee by ID, we have the ID from the API call. We again create a hash map item. We can actually rename this to like a let me see. Let's just refactor. Let's just rename this to item again. Right. So this will be item, and then the item, we just put the employee number, and we build our attribute, obviously with the right type that we want to use, and then we pass in the ID that we got as the parameter. We have our get item request. We build that. Our table is employee details, key is item, and then we have the get response item. So get response item, you will see that it awaits the response from DynamoDB client, get item, and we pass in the get item request. And then from the get item request, if the response has item, so we need to check that first, then we say return this employee entity to DTO. So this is a mapper method, and you will see in this mapper method I pass in all these fields that are coming from the response item. So if I go into that, you will see this returns employee DTO. So in here I create a new employee DTO, set all the values for employee number, employee name, email, and the phone items as I get them. So I set all these fields and then return employee DTO. Then if I go back, you will see then I return that result, and it basically goes back into the controller and sent to our API response in this particular fashion, so which is a JSON format, right? So now that is done. We are missing two operations, a update and a delete, and I left those out so that you can basically then action those from your side using what I've just highlighted. When you're creating a Dynamo request, how would you set those up? I've already showed you a hint on which item request you need to use for update and which item request you need to use for delete. So you can action those on your side and then basically have a full CRUD REST API to Dynamo database, and you can then expose that and be able to interact with your API and your DynamoDB in AWS. And so far, that is it. Let me just see if I'm missing anything here. Global tables. Nope. 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 Let me see. Yep, I think that's about it. That's about it. If we go to that, let's say get live item count. I don't want to scan that. Yep, I think we are good to go. And for now, that's about it. Please do like and subscribe, share if you can, and stay tuned for the end-to-end Spring developer from beginner to full stack, to full microservices application development. So you will see that in a couple of weeks. For now, cheers.